I spent the beginning of this week catching up on this year's WWDC sessions. I watched almost every one of them at thrice the normal speed. In this video, I'll share my impressions as a software engineer. But first, a few words on the overall perspective of me as a user. If I'm being honest, I found this year's keynote pretty boring. The new features and updates didn't feel meaningful enough, and the excitement felt mostly artificial. This isn't the first time, of course, but it was one of the least remarkable keynotes I've seen. You don't get a praise for intentionally breaking things and then sort of fixing some of them, at least for me. That applies to the liquid glass situation, to specific frameworks like SwiftUI, and to overall system performance and stability. Come to think of it, I can't remember the last time I felt truly compelled to upgrade my OS to the latest version. What features has Apple shipped in the past few years? I can recall some of them, like the Image Playground app that I used exactly once, or the more personalized Siri that never materialized, or the extra user tracking and telemetry that no one asked for, but I'll probably leave that last part for a separate episode. Now we are slowly moving to the realm of software development. The last couple of years brought many updates to SwiftUI, though it still hasn't implemented all the features of the legacy frameworks. Swift 6 introduced a new concurrency model, but then it took Apple another year to make it approachable by developers like you and me. Swift data and observations seem to be okay, but they're not back deployed, so it's gonna be another few years until we can phase out the old code. Did I forget something important? If so, let me know in the comments. One example of a solid, stable, and useful update is last year's additions to the Video Toolbox framework. It is a narrow scope change that serves a specific purpose and doesn't force you to rewrite everything just because it's better. Again, you can only use the new APIs on the latest OS versions, but I've been working on something that uses them, and so far I can't complain. Swift testing is quite good, even with its limitations such as no support for UI tests. And spoiler alert, those limitations are still in place for now. And that finally brings us to this year's WWDC updates. I'm not here just to tear it apart, and when there are really solid, really promising updates, I make sure to highlight them. This year is not an exception. But I just have to start with something else instead. I have to start with my personal elephant in the room, which is of course SwiftUI. By this point, I'm only this far from viewing it as a lost cause entirely. I've used the framework extensively since its introduction, and every single time it failed me, one way or another. After I found yet another layout bug earlier this year, I only became more convinced that SwiftUI is just as half-baked as it was 7 years ago. Long story short, a few months ago I banished SwiftUI from all of my personal projects. And ever since then, I never had to urgently fix something just because a new OS version broke it. But I will save this story for another time. Despite my distrust of SwiftUI, I did watch SwiftUI sessions at WWDC. And guess what its hero feature is this year? Reordering in collections. If this sounds like 2015 to you, that's because it is. UI collection views had interactive reordering since iOS 9, and it takes roughly the same amount of code as SwiftUI's new modifiers. Of course, if you want any special effects, you have to implement them manually, but it's exactly the same with SwiftUI. If you're not satisfied with what Apple offers out of the box, you have to write more code yourself. Except SwiftUI doesn't always give you an opportunity to do so, because it's declarative. Besides this revolutionary change, async image can now cache fetch data, so your app doesn't have to download the same image over and over again. How cool is that? Oh, okay, let's try one more thing. Apple claims that SwiftUI is now faster and more efficient at calculating changes. I think I heard it before. Last year. And the year before that. And, well, it's basically the same tale every time. What's also the same every time is that in my tests, SwiftUI consistently loses to AppKit and UIKit in performance. In short, I've learned to keep my hopes low by this point. Maybe that was Apple's idea from the very beginning. No expectations, no disappointment. Doesn't change the fact that SwiftUI is a joke though. What isn't a joke is your likes and subscriptions to this channel. My research has shown that they have a much bigger impact than any SwiftUI promises. Alright, let's move on. Liquid Glass. First of all, I'm really interested in what you think of it. More specifically, if you upgraded your main device to the latest version. None of my friends have, and neither have I. That means I have to use a virtual machine to run the latest Xcode. Yeah, I know, it's not ideal, but I just can't stand the mess that Liquid Glass is. And I believe user feedback has reached Cupertino. So this year, there's a number of changes for consumers and developers alike. What's kind of surprising to me is that Apple did actually back off with its most radical changes, like the different corner radii. I find it surprising because of a story I witnessed at last year's WWDC. In case you don't know, in addition to pre-recorded sessions, Apple also has live-streamed group labs with Q&As. It works like that. You submit questions, other viewers vote on them, and the most popular ones are answered live by the hosts. Well, in last year's Liquid Glass Lab, I witnessed how Apple's moderators took down some questions before they could gain enough votes. None of them were rude or insulting, but all of them criticized or raised concerns about Liquid Glass. I personally asked if the scroll edge effect can be disabled. You know, that thing where content becomes blurry as you scroll it. When I first saw it, I thought I needed to check my eyesight. But you can guess what happened to my question. But now it seems that Apple can no longer ignore the flaws of Liquid Glass. In this year's releases, toolbars have proper borders, so users don't need to question their eyesight or sanity. There's also a few usability fixes, like the removal of visual clutter from menus. I read a good breakdown of why this isn't good design but pure distraction. If I find that article, I'll link it down below. UI changes in this year's OS releases apply to your apps too, and in most cases, all you need to do is just build them against the latest SDKs. If all goes well, there's a slight chance I'll even consider updating my main machine to Golden Gate. And if it doesn't, I'll consider going back to Snow Leopard. At the same time, opting out of Liquid Glass entirely is no longer an option for developers. If you set a config flag to use the old UI, it will now be ignored in the new SDKs. There's one important change in the overall layout system on the iPhone. Apps have neither fixed size nor orientation anymore. And now you're required to use scene-based lifecycle, even for a single window app. Besides that, the whole concept of UI idioms is being retired. If you use modern auto layout with size classes and constraint priorities, this change means virtually nothing for you. But if you have separate view components for the iPhone and iPad, well, you better learn modern auto layout. About 6 years ago, I built a feature using Interface Builder alone, and it adjusted perfectly to the iPhone screen, iPad screen, split view, windowed app, and whatever else. From what I know, it survived all these years virtually unchanged. So maybe Interface Builder is not that useless after all. This year's changes in app layout on iOS obviously point to a foldable, or at least a very large iPhone, one that can display multiple apps side by side. But I don't like to speculate, so let's move on. Swift 6.4 arrives this fall and brings a few improvements. There's nothing radical compared to Swift 6's concurrency, but I find them quite useful. My favorite ones are weak-let properties and simpler syntax for optional existential types. For example, if you assign delegates at the time of initialization, you can declare the property as a constant and not risk reassigning it by mistake. Xcode itself received quite a few updates too. Most of them are related to agentic features which I have zero interest in at this point, except maybe app translation. To Apple's credit, they showed the elapsed time in most of the demos, and it paints a realistic picture of what you can expect, like 15 or 30 minutes for a single task. When you factor in the time it takes to prompt the model and properly review its output, I'm not sure it's such a big productivity booster. Nevertheless, I'll keep my tabs on it. Perhaps relying on agents will stop being a gamble at some point. One thing I definitely like this year is the more customizable layout of the Xcode window. I can't count how many times I went looking for the assistant editor or source control buttons, only to find them missing or moved elsewhere. Instead of the simulator, Xcode now comes with the new device hub. This component offers tools to quickly configure apps and reproduce their state, all in one place. Technically, you could do the same in the old simulator, but boy was it difficult. Perhaps my favorite category of WWDC sessions is the high-level guidance and advice. In the end, concrete tools, frameworks, and languages change nearly every year, so most sessions don't age well. On the other hand, principles of user-centric design or clear naming stay consistent for decades. And as someone who spends a lot of time working on my own projects, getting this expertise for free is great help. Of course, you can find roughly the same ideas on companies' engineering blogs or in specific case studies. But here, these things are presented as step-by-step guides. More importantly, you're given explanations why one approach works and another doesn't. And yes, you won't find any groundbreaking insights you couldn't imagine, because most takeaways are fairly obvious. But having them organized and summarized like that is one of the most valuable formats of the entire conference. I know most of you are here to learn about new APIs and syntax changes, but you really shouldn't overlook these sessions. I'll link them below. Surprisingly, we're not done yet. There's one area which was a dark horse at this year's WWDC, at least in my opinion. It is everything related to WebKit. Last year, I started experimenting with hybrid and web apps, and to my surprise, I liked the results I got. I liked the development process even more. Now I even joke that if you want truly declarative layouts, you should ditch SwiftUI, build a website, and then just wrap it in a web view. This year's updates in WebKit are what SwiftUI never got in its lifetime. Lots of bug fixes and improvements with only a tiny fraction of new features. Layout enhancements, optimized JavaScript loading, accessibility, you name it. One big new feature in WebKit is CSS grid lanes. In theory, they enable impressively powerful layouts and collections, like these recipe previews in the demo. But so far, Safari is the only browser that supports this feature, so its real-world impact is quite limited. I thought of doing a couple episodes about using web technology in native apps on iOS. Let me know if you're interested. Okay, so these are my highlights from WWDC 2026. This year's conference still had the agentic buzz and promises of SwiftUI improvements I no longer believe. But at the same time, it felt kinda refreshing and less like one long commercial, especially after last year's polarizing liquid glass and the artificial features of Apple Intelligence in 2024. I guess I'll have a closer look at the updated Xcode, AppKit and UIKit in the coming weeks. If there's something worth the attention, you can probably expect separate episodes. And if you found this one helpful, I'd appreciate you giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. New content is rare, but I'm trying to change it. With that said, make your code fly.